My beloved child, stop right here and listen carefully, because what you're about to hear begins with a moment nobody expected. Imagine a room filled with people, conversations happening everywhere, laughter in the background, music playing softly, and your soulmate standing among them trying to hide everything they've been carrying inside. They had promised themselves they would stay calm. They had promised themselves they wouldn't say anything. They had promised themselves that tonight would be like any other night. But then something happened that changed everything, because the person they had been trying so hard to forget, suppress, and keep hidden from everyone was suddenly standing in front of them, you. Don't skip this part, because the moment that came next wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't something they had prepared in advance. It was the kind of emotional breaking point that happens when someone has held too much inside for too long. They looked across the room and saw you, and for a few seconds, everything around them seemed to disappear. The voices became distant. The laughter became background noise. Their attention locked onto you, and suddenly every memory they had tried to bury came rushing back at once. They remembered the beginning. They remembered the first time they realized you were different. They remembered the little conversations that seemed meaningless at the time but became unforgettable later. They remembered your smile, your voice, the way you noticed things other people ignored, and the moments when you made them feel understood without demanding an explanation. They remembered the times they wanted to tell you how they felt but chose silence instead. And standing there in front of everyone, they realized something terrifying. They could keep pretending, but they could no longer keep pretending forever. Maybe you didn't even notice what was happening at first. You were talking to someone. Maybe you were laughing. Maybe you were simply standing there, completely unaware that someone across the room was fighting an emotional battle because of you. Their heart was racing. Their thoughts were moving faster than they could control. One part of them screamed, "Stay quiet." Another part whispered, "Tell them the truth." And then you looked at them. That one look changed the entire atmosphere. They froze. For a moment, they couldn't move. Because suddenly the person they had been thinking about in private was no longer a memory. You were right there. Real. Close. And the feelings they had spent so much time hiding became impossible to ignore. Listen carefully, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. They had imagined telling you privately. They had imagined sending a message. They had imagined calling you late at night and finally saying everything. But they never imagined saying it in front of everyone. Then someone noticed. Someone asked, "Are you okay?" They tried to laugh it off. "I'm fine." But they weren't fine. Someone else looked at them and noticed their expression had changed. The room slowly became quieter. People began wondering what was happening. Your soulmate looked at you again, and you could almost see the battle happening behind their eyes. Should I say it? Should I stay quiet? What if they reject me? What if everyone laughs? What if I regret this? What if I never get another chance? And then came the moment nobody expected. They stepped forward. Not quickly. Not confidently. But deliberately. One step. Then another. And suddenly everyone understood that something serious was happening. You looked confused. They looked terrified. But they kept coming. They stopped in front of you, took a breath, and for several seconds, they said nothing. Then they finally spoke. I've been trying to hide this for too long. The room went silent. You could hear your own heartbeat. They looked around at everyone, then looked directly at you. I don't care who knows anymore. And that was the moment everything changed. Maybe their voice trembled at first. Maybe they struggled to find the right words. But once they started speaking, the emotions they had buried for months, or perhaps years, began pouring out. I love you. 3 simple words. But in that room, they sounded enormous. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. Nobody interrupted. And your soulmate continued. I tried to convince myself that I didn't. I tried to move on. I tried to act like you didn't matter. I tried to tell myself that this was just a phase. But every time I tried to forget you, something reminded me why I couldn't. They weren't speaking perfectly. They weren't delivering a rehearsed speech. Their voice cracked. Their eyes became emotional. But there was something powerful about the imperfection because for the first time, you weren't hearing a carefully controlled version of their feelings. You were hearing the truth as they experienced it. They admitted they had been afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of vulnerability. Afraid of what other people would think. Afraid that loving you would make them weak. Afraid that you might not feel the same. And perhaps most of all, afraid that they would lose you before they ever found the courage to tell you. Then they said something that nobody expected. I don't want to lose you. The room became even quieter. And suddenly you understood why they had been acting differently. Why they had seemed distant. Why their behavior had sometimes felt confusing. Why they had disappeared and returned. Why they seemed to care one moment and pull away the next. Maybe it wasn't because there were no feelings. Maybe they were fighting feelings they didn't know how to handle. But now there was nowhere left to hide. Everyone had heard it. Everyone had witnessed it. And your soulmate had finally said the words they had been carrying alone. But then something happened that shocked everyone even more. They turned toward the people standing around them. And they said, I don't need anyone's approval. They weren't asking the room to understand. They weren't asking anyone to agree. They were simply refusing to hide anymore. I've spent too much time worrying about what everyone else would say. But this is my heart. This is my truth. Then they looked at you. And I needed you to know. You could feel the weight of that moment. Because sometimes the most powerful confession isn't the loudest sentence. It's the vulnerability behind it. This person wasn't simply saying, I love you. They were saying, I'm finally brave enough to let you see me. And maybe that is what you had been waiting for. Not a dramatic performance. Not a public declaration. But honesty. Real honesty. The kind that doesn't hide behind jokes. The kind that doesn't disappear when things become uncomfortable. The kind that doesn't pretend not to care. And now the question became unavoidable. What would you say? Everyone looked at you. Your soulmate looked at you. The room seemed to stop breathing. They had just placed their heart in front of everyone. And for the first time, they had no idea what would happen next. You could see the fear returning to their face. Maybe they suddenly regretted saying it. Maybe they wondered if they had gone too far. Maybe they prepared themselves for rejection. But then you stepped closer. You didn't immediately speak. You simply looked at them. And in that silence, something changed. Because sometimes a person's eyes answer a question before their voice does. Your soulmate's expression softened. Their shoulders relaxed. And suddenly the tension in the room began to disappear. Maybe you reached for their hand. Maybe you smiled. Maybe you simply whispered, "I needed to hear that." And those words broke whatever remained of the wall between you. They looked down for a moment, overwhelmed. Then they laughed through their tears. Not because the situation was funny. Because relief had finally found its way through all the fear. For so long, they had carried the weight of uncertainty. Now they knew. Now you knew. And everyone else knew. The secret wasn't a secret anymore. But perhaps the most beautiful part wasn't that they confessed their love in front of everyone. It was that they finally stopped being ashamed of having feelings. They finally understood that vulnerability isn't weakness. It is courage. And maybe you needed to hear that too. Because perhaps you've spent too much time wondering whether you should hide what you feel. Maybe you've been afraid of looking foolish. Maybe you've been afraid of rejection. Maybe you've been waiting for the perfect moment. But sometimes there is no perfect moment. There is only an honest one. And sometimes honesty changes everything. Stay till the end, because the final part of this story reveals why this moment mattered far more than anyone realized. After everyone began talking again, your soulmate pulled you aside. Away from the crowd. Away from the noise. Away from everyone's opinions. And for the first time, they spoke to you privately. I didn't say all of that because I wanted attention. They looked directly into your eyes. I said it because I was tired of pretending. And that sentence stayed with you. Because you realized the public confession wasn't really about the audience. It was about freedom. They had spent so long hiding their emotions that they had forgotten what it felt like to simply be honest. And now they were free. Free to admit they cared. Free to admit they were afraid. Free to admit they wanted another chance. Free to ask you what you wanted. Then they said something even more important. I don't expect you to forget everything that happened. I don't expect you to trust me immediately. I don't expect you to give me everything just because I finally said the words. I just wanted you to know the truth. And that was when you realized this wasn't simply a confession. It was accountability. They weren't demanding an answer. They were offering honesty. They were giving you the freedom to choose. And perhaps that is what genuine love looks like. Not pressure. Not manipulation. Not possession. Choice. They had finally chosen honesty, and now they were giving you the same freedom. Maybe you told them that you still had questions. Maybe you told them you were afraid too. Maybe you admitted that you had missed them. Maybe you confessed that there were nights when you wanted to reach out but didn't know how. And suddenly the conversation became something neither of you expected. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. Two people finally saying the things they had been too afraid to say. And sometimes that is more beautiful than perfection. Because real love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a trembling voice. A difficult apology. A hand held after a long silence. A decision to listen instead of defend. A willingness to change. A promise followed by action. And perhaps that is where this story truly begins. Not with the public confession, but with what happens after it. Because saying, "I love you," is only the beginning. Keeping that love healthy is the real challenge. If they truly mean what they said, they will have to prove it through consistency. They will have to communicate. They will have to respect your boundaries. They will have to show up when life isn't romantic. And you will have to decide whether you are willing to meet them there. Because a confession can open a door. But only two people working together can build a home behind it. So if you are waiting for someone to finally admit how they feel, don't only dream about the words. Look for the behavior. Look for courage. Look for honesty. Look for effort. Look for the kind of love that remains present after the emotional moment has passed. Maybe that is the real surprise waiting for you. Not that someone might scream your name in front of everyone. But that someone might finally become brave enough to stop hiding. And if that happens, don't rush. Let the truth unfold. Let the relationship breathe. Let trust be rebuilt. Let actions speak. Because the most unforgettable confession isn't the one everyone hears. It's the one that changes how two people treat each other afterward. And perhaps one day, when you look back at this moment, you won't remember who was standing around you. You won't remember the noise. You won't remember the shocked expressions. You'll remember the look in their eyes when they finally stopped pretending. You'll remember the courage it took to say, "I love you." And most importantly, you'll remember what happened after the confession. Because that is where the real story begins. Maybe they didn't scream their love because they wanted everyone to hear. Maybe they finally said it because they needed you to hear. And perhaps the message for you is simple. Never settle for a love that only exists in silence. Never chase someone who refuses to communicate. Never confuse intensity with commitment. But when someone finally comes to you with honesty, humility, and genuine effort, don't be afraid to listen. Sometimes two people aren't separated by a lack of love. Sometimes they're separated by fear. And when fear finally becomes smaller than love, the truth has a way of coming out. So imagine that room one last time. Everyone is watching. The secret is gone. The silence is broken. Your soulmate is standing in front of you with tears in their eyes, no mask, no excuse, no hiding. And they say the words they should have said long ago. "I love you. I don't want to lose you. And if you give me the chance, I want to show you, not just tell you." And this time, the room doesn't matter. The audience doesn't matter. The past doesn't matter as much as it once did. Because two hearts are finally having the conversation they were too afraid to have. And maybe the greatest twist is this. The confession wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. The beginning of honesty. The beginning of healing. The beginning of a relationship where neither person has to pretend anymore. And if this story finds its way into your own life, remember one thing above everything else: real love doesn't become powerful because everyone sees it. It becomes powerful when two people finally have the courage to see each other clearly. So don't fear the truth. Don't fear the conversation. Don't fear vulnerability. And don't fear what happens when the mask finally falls. Because sometimes the person who has been silent the longest has the most important words waiting inside them. And when those words finally come out, everything can change. Maybe not because the world suddenly understands your love story, but because you finally understand it too. My beloved child, if you've stayed until this moment, listen carefully, because the loudest part of this story was never the confession. It was the courage behind it. Imagine the room slowly returning to normal, people beginning to talk again, the music playing in the background, but for you and this person, everything feels completely different. The secret that once lived between you is no longer hidden, and the fear that once controlled every conversation has finally lost its power. Your soulmate looks at you differently now. Not because they suddenly became someone else, but because they finally allowed you to see the part of them they had spent so long protecting. They may still be nervous. They may still wonder what happens next. But something has changed inside them. They no longer want to hide behind silence. They no longer want to pretend that you mean nothing. They have finally understood that sometimes losing someone hurts far more than risking rejection. But now comes the part that matters most. A beautiful confession can touch your heart, but a lasting relationship is built after the applause disappears. It is built in ordinary mornings, difficult conversations, unexpected problems, moments of disagreement, and days when neither person feels romantic. If this person truly means what they said, their love won't disappear when the room becomes empty. It will become quieter, steadier, and more consistent. They won't simply tell you that you matter. They'll show you. They'll remember what hurts you. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll listen when you speak. They'll apologize when they're wrong. They'll stop making you guess where you stand. They'll understand that loving someone isn't about making a dramatic promise once, it's about choosing that person again and again through everyday actions. And perhaps you need to hear this too. Don't allow one emotional moment to erase everything that came before it. If there were wounds, acknowledge them. If there were broken promises, talk about them. If trust was damaged, rebuild it slowly. You don't have to rush into forgiveness simply because someone finally admitted their feelings. You can have compassion and still have standards. You can love someone and still require them to prove that they are ready to love you differently. Maybe the two of you will sit together after everyone leaves, and for the first time there won't be an audience. No friends watching. No people whispering. No expectations. Just the two of you, finally talking honestly. They may tell you what they were afraid of. You may tell them what their silence did to your heart. There may be tears. There may be laughter. There may be moments where neither of you knows what to say. But for once, the silence won't be hiding the truth. It will simply be two people trying to understand each other. And maybe they will say, "I wish I had told you sooner." Maybe you'll answer, "I wish you had too." And perhaps you'll both realize that the past cannot be rewritten, but the future can be written differently. That's the real miracle, not forgetting what happened, not pretending everything was perfect, but deciding that the future deserves more honesty than the past received. If this person truly belongs in your life, let the next chapter be slower and stronger. Don't build it entirely on chemistry. Build it on communication. Don't build it on promises. Build it on consistency. Don't build it on fear of losing each other. Build it on the freedom to choose each other without pressure. Because the healthiest love doesn't say, "You belong to me." It says, "I choose you, and I will continue choosing you." There is a difference. And maybe that is what your soulmate finally learned. They didn't need to possess you. They needed to stop being afraid of loving you. They didn't need everyone to approve. They needed to be honest with themselves. They didn't need a perfect speech. They needed courage. And perhaps you didn't need a dramatic confession either. Maybe you simply needed proof that someone was finally willing to stop running from the truth. So if this person enters your life again with sincerity, don't focus only on how emotional their words sound. Watch what happens afterward. Do they become more consistent? Do they communicate? Do they respect your feelings? Do they make space for your needs? Do they show up when things become difficult? That is where you'll find your answer. Because words can make your heart race. Actions can make your heart feel safe. And you deserve safety. You deserve a love where you don't have to decode every message. You deserve someone who doesn't disappear whenever emotions become uncomfortable. You deserve someone who can say, "We need to talk," instead of running away. You deserve someone who can admit, "I was wrong," without turning the conversation into a battle. You deserve someone who can love you privately and publicly with the same honesty. And if you become that person for someone else too, something beautiful happens. The relationship stops being a performance and becomes a partnership. No more pretending. No more emotional games. No more waiting for the other person to make the first move. Just two people saying, "We're here. Let's figure this out." Maybe the world will never understand your connection completely. Maybe other people will have opinions. Maybe some people will question it. But your relationship doesn't need to be understood by everyone. It needs to be healthy for the two people living inside it. So don't measure your love by how loudly someone declares it. Measure it by how gently they handle your heart afterward. That is the real test. And if they pass that test, something extraordinary can happen. The confession that once shocked everyone can become the beginning of something peaceful. The tears can become laughter. The fear can become trust. The distance can become closeness. The uncertainty can become clarity. And one day, you may look back at that unforgettable moment and realize that the most important sentence wasn't, "I love you." It was everything that came after. I'll listen. I'll change. I'll be honest. I'll show up. I won't run when things get difficult. Those are the words that build a future. So if someone you love finally opens their heart, don't be afraid to open yours carefully. You don't have to give everything immediately. Let trust grow. Let actions prove intentions. Let the relationship develop naturally. And if they don't come, don't let the absence of a confession make you question your worth. You were worthy before the confession. You were worthy during the silence. You are worthy after the story ends. Your value was never dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. That's why this story has a beautiful ending either way. If they return with genuine love, you get the opportunity to build something new. If they don't, you still walk away with greater wisdom about the kind of love you deserve. Either way, you grow. Either way, you become stronger. Either way, your heart learns something it will carry into the future. So tonight, don't chase the dramatic moment. Chase the truth. Don't chase someone because you're afraid they'll disappear. Choose relationships where both people willingly stay. Don't beg for words. Look for actions. Don't settle for temporary intensity. Choose lasting consistency. And don't ever forget the most important lesson hidden inside this story. The person who truly loves you won't just make a grand declaration when emotions are high. They will make quiet choices every day that tell you, you are safe with me. That's the love worth waiting for. That's the love worth protecting. That's the love worth building. And perhaps someday, long after the crowd has forgotten what happened in that room, you and this person will remember it differently. You won't remember the shocked faces. You won't remember the whispers. You won't remember who was watching. You'll remember the moment two people finally stopped running. You'll remember the moment fear became courage. You'll remember the moment silence became truth. And you'll realize that the confession wasn't really about shouting love in front of everyone. It was about finally having the courage to say it where it mattered most, directly to you. So if your heart has been waiting for someone to speak, let them speak. If they want to return, let them return with changed behavior. If they want another chance, let them earn it. If they want to stay, let them prove it. And if life takes you in another direction, walk forward without regret. Because the greatest love story isn't the one where someone finally chooses you in front of a crowd. It's the one where, when the crowd disappears and nobody is watching, two people still choose each other. Quietly. Honestly. Consistently. And completely. So close your eyes tonight and release the fear of what you cannot control. You don't have to force the ending. You don't have to chase the confession. You don't have to wonder forever. Let life reveal what is real. Let actions speak louder than promises. Let love prove itself through time. And if the right person is standing in front of you one day, heart trembling, eyes full of truth, saying the words they were once too afraid to say, remember this moment. Don't ask only, do they love me? Ask, are we ready to love each other well? Because that question can change everything. And maybe that's where your beautiful new chapter begins. Not with a scream. Not with an audience. Not with a dramatic declaration. But with two people looking at each other and finally saying, no more hiding. No more running. Let's be honest this time. And from there, let the story unfold. Let it be slower. Let it be healthier. Let it be real. Because the love that survives after the crowd goes home is the love that matters. And if that love finds its way back to you, may it come with peace instead of confusion, honesty instead of silence, consistency instead of promises, and courage instead of fear. May you never again have to wonder whether you are wanted. May you never again have to beg someone to communicate. May you never again confuse anxiety with love. And may the person beside you understand that your heart is not something to win once. It is something to honor every day. So remember this final truth: the loudest declaration may capture everyone's attention, but the quietest acts of love are what build a forever. And if two hearts are truly meant to walk forward together, they won't need the whole world to believe in them. They'll simply need the courage to believe in each other. And when the lights go out, the music stops, the crowd disappears, and the room becomes quiet again, there will be only two people left with the truth. You and them. No audience. No performance. No pretending. Just two hearts finally brave enough to say, I'm here. I choose you. And this time, I'm not running. And maybe that's the ending you've been waiting for. Not a perfect ending. A real one. A peaceful one. A beginning disguised as an ending. And this time, love doesn't have to scream. It only has to stay.